Greetings and salutation, gamers. Welcome to another epi of League Unlock. My name is Eric Feinhan Solo. On today's epi, as we get to some more elimination matches from the Swiss stage at the World Championship. Some definitely underdog stories on the day coming into this one in what was potentially and ended up being the final series for 100 Thieves as an organization. And you know what? At the very least, they went down swinging and gave us, I'm going to call it a banger of a series against T1 because they absolutely pushed them to the limits in both of these games, really. Of course, they end up losing 2-0 to the hands of T1, but across the board, you got to give them some credit. We had Big Dokes on the Ambessa, who I know if you've been following him, all his hilarious vlogs, he's learning Korean to, infiltrate and get into what T1 is doing. But Big Dokes had some big performances, some outplays under turret in game one. And listen, there were moments, there were angles. 100 Thieves were doing all that they could. They were finding nice engages, even though there was a 9-kill Xin Zhao opposite them. There were moments where you felt like 100 Thieves could win this, and it was, again, I've seen people talking about the team fighting, the hands difference for Western teams in general. They're not as far behind as you would imagine, but the case in point, or the bigger part of this series, was when 100 Thieves would win a team fight, even if it wasn't a very decisive. Let's say 2 kills. They get a 2-0 or a 3-1 kind of scenario, and then it doesn't really translate to much. There were a lot of moments where, 4 turrets total. For how close these two games were, it was 4 turrets total for 100 Thieves. And I think, Quid absolutely had a banger of a series, did his best, even though there were some suspect Silas moments where he maybe got a little too far ahead. Definitely the Akali game in the second game. My man was putting everything he could and doing everything he could to lead 100 Thieves to the promised land. And that's matching up against the GOAT. I know he got a solo kill on the Silas, and then he had some fantastic play on the Akali as well. Obviously, Faker had a pretty damn good Orianna game and was basically at least a level ahead of Quid for the majority of it, and ends up getting the last laugh. It has to happen at the World Championship. Everybody dives in to try and kill Faker. More often than not, it's on that Orianna pick, and they're unable to do it. Dokla was like 2 levels behind him on the Rumble, can't get enough damage to kill him. That ends up being one of the final nails in the coffin. But especially this second game, all you have to look at is 100 Thieves were finding team fights, finding angles. They get a 2-0, kind of just run around, don't do anything around the Baron pit. They don't even really establish vision too much, and then they end up just getting caught out above the Baron pit, and that ends up being Baron and solo for T1. Good game, see you later. But 0 turrets. Even when they were finding advantages, they weren't even killing outer turrets against T1, which you'll never cut into a gold lead when you still have all that standing gold on the map. So again, that is the bigger difference that we saw in a lot of these Western versus the LCK LPL matchups, was just not knowing how to translate any advantage that they get. And when you watch a team like Gen G, even when they're the ones getting caught out or 2 members are going down, they play the map so well that they're the ones even getting a turret cross court, or they're securing even things like red buffs or an extra wave of minions so that they're negating what any kind of gold lead you got in that fight. 100 Thieves were the opposite, but I still don't want to harp on them, because both of these games you saw angles, and if 100 Thieves, let's face it, if they played near perfectly, they could have won both of these games. I think the biggest individual gap that you really felt was in the bot lane, and that was, it's not like Guma completely outplayed or destroyed FBI, but especially the Kaisa game. There wasn't that killer instinct from FBI that you see from the best 80 carries, the top 80 carries from some of the best teams. And that's, willing, especially on a pick like Kaisa, willing to go into the back line to not maybe be the main initiator, but at the very least the main follow-up. And it felt like he was really only using that as a defensive mechanism, and maybe a little bit scared. But the Kaisa doing less damage than both the Akali, the Rumble, the Orianna, barely more damage than the Pantheon. That's not what you need out of what is a borderline hypercarry in Kai'Sa. So FBI, I think, was the main... Again, I don't want to say let down because Gumakiri is obviously a very difficult matchup, but everyone else on 100 Thieves felt like they were doing some heavy lifting. And again, this is the final series that we will see under that 100 Thieves banner, 7+ years since they joined when franchising came in 2018. And at the very least, you can hang your hat, North America and 100T, that you went out swinging against the 2-time defending world champions and pushed them to the limit. And that's not because 100 Thieves or because T1 was bad on the day. This was more T1, man, mixing up both these squads. 100 Thieves, T1, too similar, am I right, guys? 100 Thieves stepping up on the day to actually push T1, the 2-time defending champs, and probably could have got some wins against some of the more middle-tier contenders at this year's World Championship. The other matchup on the day, could you imagine saying that the first seed from the LPL would lose to a Brazilian team to the second seed from the LTA? That you'd have to be absolutely insane to actually say that. And more seriously, of course, we did predict that, but I'm not feeling good about BLG despite the 2-0 when I was just praising 100 Thieves for maybe not shying away, trying to make these plays. VKS seems scared on the day. I thought they'd be going all out. They've got nothing to lose. This series started with 2 absolutely abysmal dives from BLG, where you thought, oh my god, is this upset really actually gonna happen? And then VKS followed that up by a pretty bad dive in their own right. But Keatstar did not play to the same level that we saw against PSG, and despite the 2-0 coming out of BLG, Shadow didn't look good. How about winning a game when you're 1-5-9? How about on the Poppy game? It's just him constantly getting caught out. He had 8 kill participation out of like the 21 kills for BLG, and really this was just Knight having to hard carry the top seed from the LPL against a Brazilian team. I mean, Ziggs mid, usually that's a bot lane pick, but Knight was an absolute zoning menace on a pick we're not accustomed to seeing. He had the double damage pretty much anybody in that game, which I know if you've ever played ARAM, Ziggs is the #1 DPM farmer that you can get on that map, and that's exactly what Knight did. But then he follows that up by a gargantuan 1v9 LeBlanc performance in that game too, where I know he got caught out a couple of times, but he single-handedly was the BLG gold lead for the majority of this game. And listen, the fashion, it's poetic how BLG eventually ends up actually clinching this series. A near 10k gold lead, and then misplays, overextensions, pushing into the base, gets caught out, a couple members go down. And if not for Boal deciding to TP out of the base when super minions are coming in, VKS might have won this game. They had to rely on Bin TPing into a minion line to kind of, not backdoor, but base race against VKS to close out the game. And if Boal stays there, doesn't TP, who knows how that game plays out. VKS had just shifted momentum to their side, and Boal would have been able to defend against the Rumble instead of Miru TPing in with like 20 health. Miru had a pretty rough day, by the way. Now, it looks extra bad because Knight was playing at such a high level, but the Azir game was pretty, egregious. He was whiffing up simple Azir combos. This is the guy who was far and away the best mid laner in the LTA South. So, messy game out of him. Messy game out of BLG. There's no way you're coming out of this series saying, yeah, I'm ready to see the level up from BLG, because they have not looked this bad throughout the entirety of the LPL season, and to struggle, kind of slog their way through. I know, again, VKS didn't get a single turret in that first game, but if not for some mechanical, like straight up just missing skill shots or missing whiffing engages out of VKS, this is easily going to a game 3, and you could paint the path where VKS wins the series. Maybe that's just me getting a little bit of copium, because we said this would happen. But the angles were there, and I'm no more impressed with BLG than I was heading into this series, as was probably going to be the expectation, beating this Brazilian squad. But Now you go forward and you say, okay, how are we feeling about BLG in the next round? Because this is the final round of the Swiss stage that we're going to be getting. We had the draw stage, and immediately you get the LPL Civil War, the fraud watch, as everyone wants to call it. TES versus BLG, which obviously we got back-to-back best of fives in the LPL from these two. It was BLG coming away with it, and I know people are upset that this kind of tanked the whole draw because everything else was kind of predestined, because T1 had already played FlyQuest and CFO, so had to basically match up against Koi if they weren't going to draw one of these LPL squads. But now only 2 teams from the LPL will be getting out to quarters, which is obviously low, but the 4th seed wasn't actually there. But I'm actually excited to kind of see if both these teams can find their form in a familiar matchup within the LPL, within China, because both of them have not looked that good lately. Now, I will say, BLG struggling versus VKS versus Top Esports getting absolutely dumpstered by Gen G are very different. They're very different paths. Gen G's a little bit better than VKS, excuse me. And I, in this current form, am favoring TES over BLG right now. Now, they could still turn a switch on, and Knight could just put on his big boy carry pants yet again and lead them past TES. But as a team right now, TES look better than BLG. It's a little sad because we don't get NA versus EU. We don't get LPL versus some of these other teams that might have to prove themselves. So instead, we're getting CFO versus FlyQuest, which you know the mentality of FlyQuest is not great right now. And CFO have had some tougher draws, so absolutely no question. I think CFO are the favorites in that matchup. They should be the favorites heading into that matchup. And then we get a little bit of MKOI versus T1, of course. They had to be the bullet takers because, as I said, T1 couldn't play CFO or FlyQuest, which, by the way, maybe you need a bit of a format change. If you played a team in a best of 1, shouldn't you be able to replay them later in a best of 3, like a one-of? It limits it so much, as you saw in this draft, or this draw, where, again, T1 has to go against MKOI, and, you know, we have the history of the Mad Lions versus T1, the famous 16 minutes, 47 second demolishing, but that was a very different Mad Lions squad, and MKOI looked okay against Team Secret Whales. Do I give them much of a chance against T1? No. I think we gave 100 Thieves like a 2% chance, and that probably raised to 10% at some point in this series. I think if 100 Thieves played like they did against T1, they probably would beat a squad like Movistar Koi in a head-to-head. So I'd be very surprised, as everyone else would, and Riot would be very disappointed if T1 doesn't get past MKOI. So based on who the favorites are heading into this final round of Swiss stage, I feel like you've got Top Esports going through, which might be a controversial one, CFO, and then T1. And if that does end up being the case, then you have, at the very least, a Western squad and, you know, an LCP team. That's all 4 LCK squads already sitting there waiting, assuming T1 gets through. And that would still be the biggest upset of the tournament if they do not. By no means were they at 100% against 100 Thieves, by the way. They can absolutely still level up and ramp up. They need that LPL buff to match up against them because it's only been Western teams that they've been beaten up on, right? FlyQuest, 100 Thieves, and now MKOI to qualify for quarterfinals to make for probably the easiest path to quarterfinals that T1 has ever had. But we know the best of 5 knockouts are when T1 truly reaches their final form, especially at the World Championship. So we are one single day away from best of 5s or entering that top 8 round, and we will be back to break it all down over the weekend. But that is it today for League Unlocked. My name is Eric. You people stay beautiful as always, and you know we will catch you on that flippity flip.